Welcome everyone to 3 Feet Away Studios. This is the very first episode on YouTube that I have ever done. Actually, my first time to get on YouTube and try to create anything. It's taken me a while to get here, but I have to thank my friend Sam for kind of nudging me that way. The purpose of this YouTube channel will be really to share some of the knowledge that I have learned since beginning electronic music in the early 80s. I have been playing piano or playing at piano since I was 6 years old, but starting to get into electronic music in the 80s, and then I dropped out for a little while and recently came back, and I will tell you that since the 80s, things have gotten in one way a lot easier and in one way a lot harder. But what I wanted to show you today, just jump right out of the gate, just showing you some things that I think will help you in your production, is one thing that keyboard players, the advantage we have over guitar players, drummers, etc., is that we actually can somewhat emulate other instruments. If you're a good enough player or someone that can emulate guitar playing very well, which there are those guys out there, then you could essentially probably do most of everything you want to do on a DAW like the one I have here and not have to hire anybody or not have to work with anybody else's timeline. Now, obviously, most of you are probably screaming at the screen that it's always better to have live musicians, and I don't think I disagree with that. However, that's not often practical, especially now with COVID, trying to get people over to the studio to work, especially on your own material, gets more and more difficult. And then you have to pay them, you have to put up with their personalities, etc. So what I've always tried to do, even from the 80s when I had keyboards whose knobs were the size of your head, what I tried to do was to do more songs with instruments that sounded real drums, real bass, real brass. Obviously, in the 80s, I wasn't as successful as I have been now. So what I'm going to show you today is if you, for example, brass. Brass is one that, as a keyboard player, is relatively simple to do, and most keyboards come with a pretty decent brass ensemble. But what I have found that if you're trying to get more of a realistic sound or something that you can put back in the mix a little bit that might have people questioning, is that real brass or is that keyboard brass? Then I'm going to show you the way that I do it. And this is by no means exhaustive, but I do want to show you the difference. So what I've done here is I've set up my DAW and I'm using Mixcraft 9 Pro Studio. I bought a keyboard a number of years ago and Mixcraft came with it. And I have used some of the others, some of the more expensive ones, or at least tried them out. And I will tell you that there's nothing that Mixcraft really won't do that I needed to do. Because I don't sing and I generally don't write music with words, almost everything that I do is instrumental, which you will see on the bumpers or hear on the bumpers to this beginning and end of these YouTube sessions. I'll play my own music so you can hear what I'm talking about. I tend to shy away a little bit from EDM and trance and rap only because I think it's been done so much. And to me, it's really easy to just find a drum loop and play over the top of it. It's much harder to create drums that sound realistic. To create brass sections, to recreate an organ with a Leslie speaker. Those things are much more difficult in my opinion. And so most of the songs that I write, I try to write them as close to an original sounding instrument as I can. Some I haven't been real successful, but others I think are very, very close. So on this first episode, let's just dive right in. I am going to recreate brass, right, with the way that I do it. Now, there is one caveat that I'll mention when I'm done with this for this particular DAW, and I'll also put up an episode maybe next week, maybe later this week, that'll show you how I do it on one of my keyboards when I'm playing live and I play a lot of brass sections, I don't rely on the internal brass. I generally will make my own patch. So the first thing that I have done on this, just to show you the difference, is I called up a brass section in this DAW that it's actually not bad. It's fairly decent. I don't know how well you can hear that. Let me turn that up a little bit more for you. And I'm in between speakers, so it's going to be difficult also to hear the... All right, so that's just a regular brass section. And honestly, buried in a mix, that's not going to be too bad. One of the things that I will tell you, it's real thin sounding. It's as loud as it will probably go coming through these speakers. So what I would do is if, for example, I didn't have some of these other assets, I might pick another brass sound like this one, which is very similar to the first one, right? And what I would do is I would have both of those playing at one time. See how much brighter that sounds? Another thing I might do is take one brass section and make it an octave lower or an octave higher, which I'm not going to do right now, but I will show you in a minute why that's important. But if I take those two brass sections and I layer them together, and I can do same things with chorus, I can add some chorus. Another thing I'm going to do, and again, I'm not sure how you'll hear this stereo spread, but let's move this around a little bit. I'm going to spread this out stereo-wise. Again, I'm not sure how much of the stereo spread you can hear, but to my ears, that's much better. I mean, just spreading those things out where they're not on top of each other, it makes it great. Let's go in and add a little bit of chorus to this and see if how that works. I will tell you that the chorus on here is really good, but you have to go in and tweak it a little bit. It just comes up. Let me see if I have a brass chorus in here that I might have done. I don't see any in here, so let's just use the one that comes up. And I'm going to put it just on the first one called Brass Section 2. So that's with it. And this is without it. And I think you should be able to hear the difference. I can. So let's put let's put chorus on both of them. All right. And see what that sounds like. All right, so here we go. Yeah, much better, much different. Let's solo these out so you can hear that as well. Here's the first one. It's coming out of pretty much totally the left speaker. Here's the one coming out of the right speaker. All right, and here are them together with chorus. Yeah, those are great. That's much better. Now, having set all that up, that's generally not what I would do. That would be simpler, just to grab two brass sounds, chorus them a little bit, stack them off of each other by octaves or at least left and right. But that's not how I approach brass. And I'm going to play you a song maybe in a minute as we roll out of here so you can hear what I do with my brass. But what I would normally do then is I played horns in a band for a while, played saxophone. And what you do in a saxophone band or a horn band is you have 3, 4, 5 horn players, and you have individual horns that all play together, and they may play different sounds, they may play different octaves, whatever, or different pitches or whatever. So that's what I do, is to make it sound more realistic. Is I'll take, for example, and this is not the best tenor sax, but pretty cheesy with that the warble on the end of it, but that's what I have to work with right now. And then I got a baritone sax that I would use just for a little bit of bass. Also, there's some cool things you can do with the bari sax in a song that I'll show you at a later time. And then alto, right? And then trombone, trumpet, and trumpet again. And I generally like to use 2 trumpets on a track, and I'd stack them differently, do some different things with them. But so let's take all those. So we have individual tracks tenor sax, bari, alto, trombone, 2 trumpets, right? So that's a big horn section, but you could have that in a horn section. That's a Chicago or Blood, Sweat, and Tears horn section. So let's play all those together, all right? I think that sounds absolutely fantastic. Really, really good. Now, there are ways that once we get into recording, I'll show you how to do we'll use the feature where we can come in and out with, we can, make it louder when we need to or softer when we need to, swell in and out. Certainly those things will even make it sound more realistic. Another thing, as I mentioned before, that you want to do is you want to separate these out into their, where they should be in their pitches. For example, a tenor sax is obviously lower than an alto sax, right? It's meant to be played lower. So if, as keyboard players, we tend to ham fist everything and we'll take a piano chord and we'll play the brass over the top of it, that does not work. Understand that tenor sax can only go so high and it can only go so low. Alto sax can only go so high, it can only go so low, right? So you want to try to keep them within their registers. So for example, on the sax, on the tenor, let's solo that out. On the tenor, right about there is where the tenor should be, right? But if I want to play one-handed or one-fingered brass lines, I need to make sure that that one stays in its lane. So what I would do then is I would go in and I would, I'm going to open this one up. So you can see tenor sax, right? And I'm going to look at it. I'm going to show the details, if I can. Well, there you go. I've already transposed this down to 12, so it's in the lane it should be. Then if I go to, for example, the baritone sax, the same thing. I could probably move that down to 2 octaves lower, but I'm not. Alto sax is, I'm going to leave that right where it is. The trombone, down 12, or down an octave. Trumpet, up an octave, and trumpet up an octave. And actually what I could do to make it even more realistic is I could do 1 trumpet up an octave and 1 trumpet in the same octave as the alto sax, and let's do that. So the reason being, again, is because these instruments are meant to be played in a certain register, and if you try to play a tenor sax in a higher register, it won't sound natural. So you want to play it about where it's supposed to be. So here again is the sound. Well, that's not all of them. Let's unsolo that. Here you go. And then now let's compare that to this brass section here, right? Maybe. Let's unarm these real quick. And I'll make sure as my videos go on YouTube that I won't make them quite as long or as confusing as this one, but just learn, right? And again, that's not bad. I just think it's thin. Let's do these up here again. Now, this all will also depend on how many tracks can you lay down, how much headroom, I mean, how much, not headroom, but how much polyphony do you have? There's all things that will decide whether you do it this way, but if in any way that I can do it this way, of course, I will do it this way. I think that just sounds, it's breaking up a little bit, so I'll need to bring it down some. But that's how I do brass. And in fact, I'll play you a song in just a minute that'll show you that's how I do brass in a lot of my brass sections. So that's it for today. Pretty much all I wanted to show you is that. One other thing that I'll tell you is I'd like to be able to do that I haven't been able to figure out how to do on this DAW is I'd like to be able to take the tenor sax, the baritone sax, and the alto sax because they're reed instruments, and I'd like to have them play slightly flat. because having played a reed instrument myself, that is the saxophones are almost always a little flat, and you have to mess with their tone a little bit to get them to play in pitch. On the other hand, brass instruments are almost always sharp, right? So I would love to take these things and detune them from themselves a little bit, right? Make the saxes a little bit lower in tune, and the trombone, trumpet, and the other trumpet a little bit higher in pitch or a little bit sharper in pitch, and that would even give it a more realistic sound. And certainly we'll do that in upcoming episodes where I show you how to do it on a keyboard as opposed to a DAW. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I've certainly enjoyed making it. If you like this, please subscribe and like, and we're going to start building this thing one video at a time. Again, this is Jeff from 3 Feet Away Studios. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks.